we're live, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee on the 12th of May. My name is Lewis Stark and I'm the chair today. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. The agenda papers and other relevant information also are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please could attendees keep background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. And also please, not so much for people in this room, but for those looking in on live stream, can you speak into the microphones when you want to make a point or raise an issue? I'd be very grateful for the people on the live stream rather than us around this table. We don't have anyone attending online, do we? Clark? So it's just everybody in the room. Right. I would like to introduce everyone in the room to those in the live stream so that they are aware of those who are going to help us with our scrutiny today. From the committee we have Councillor Peverday, the Vice Chair, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Highfield and Councillor Heathfield. We also have two Cabinet members today, which I'm delighted to say is one more than we usually have, and I'm pleased that they have both agreed to attend. Councillor Price, who leads on transport and infrastructure, and Councillor Durkin, who leads on roads and regulatory services. We also have a number of officers here: Ed Bradford, Dr. David Land, Simon Hobbs, and Julie Freeman. We also have two members of the Fire Authority. I'm making your acquaintance again, Anna. Thanks for attending. And Tom Morgan. Thanks for attending. And I believe we may very well have someone from the police coming shortly. And I'll introduce him when he does arrive. To support me today, we have Daniel Webb, the Scrutiny Officer, Simon Kahn, the Clerk, and Alfie Rees-Glynos, who's operating the live stream. Clerk, have we any apologies for absence?
I've received apologies from Councillor David Davies.
David Davis, okay, thank you. Have we any substitutes, Clerk?
No substitutes have been passed on.
Members, do you have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. I turn now to item 4, which is the minutes. Are members happy for me to sign the minutes as a fair reflection of previous meeting? Can we vote on that, please? That's unanimous, Clerk, and I'll sign them after. On to item 5. Clerk, have we any questions from members of the public?
No questions have been received from members of the public.
Thank you. And item 6, any questions from members of the council?
No questions received from councillors.
So that quickly brings us on to the main substantive item today, which is scrutiny of the road safety measures in the authority. As is my usual approach, I am going to allow a set time for the discussion today. So I will be calling for a comfort break at 11:45, which should give us enough time to discuss what is a very important, and I suspect will at times be quite an energetic debate, given the previous debates we've had on active travel measures. So at 11:45 we'll have a comfort break, during which we will then look at any recommendations we will have, members, so that we can actually then agree them after the meeting. I will want to have an open discussion on the work programme today, our last item, because we know that our scrutiny officer has been reviewing the structure and the way that we work in scrutiny, and I do want us to have enough time to actually discuss the way we want to move forward on that, and I will be doing that today. For the item today, we have 5 objectives, and I will read them out because I think it's important to remind ourselves of what they are, and I will be structuring the meeting around these objectives, although I won't be rigid. If anyone does want to raise any issues that don't quite comply with the structure that I put forward, then I'm quite happy to digress where it actually adds to the debate. The first one is I want to understand road user safety and the current council policy. But although we do talk about speed limits, I don't want to just restrict it to speed limits. I do want us to have a much more wide-ranging discussion on actually road safety and what other instruments might be available to us. I want to look at best practice on the provision of road architecture, evaluate the effectiveness of the current school street safety initiative, scrutinise the administration of TROs across the council. And here, Ed, I'll be particularly interested to see what TROs we as a council promote and fund in terms of trying to improve the road safety of our network. And do remember, members, we have 2,000 miles of roads here, which is a very big network for a small populated county like ourselves. And the last one, I want to scrutinise the enforcement of road safety measures, including speed limits. Can I welcome, is that Bob Haynes at the end? Thank you, Bob, for coming. I'll be looking to you to input in that last one, particularly where you can, when we come to enforcement. And we have also published the strategy from the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I'll be looking to talk through that as well. Okay, thanks very much. First of all, can I thank officers for the report that they gave us and for the 2 appendices? Can I thank the Police and Crime Commissioner through you, Bob, for the road safety strategy, which I know that Councillor Highfield is actually was the one who brought it to our attention, but at least it is there. And can I thank the Fire Authority for providing their link and document on their definition of risk. I think these are all important. And I do think one of the things we will look at today will be partnership working, because that strikes me as one of the big issues around this. Can I start today around the policy context and looking at both Cabinet members? I'm conscious the Police and Crime Commissioner have a road safety strategy, and I think it's a very good one, with about 13 or 14 priorities that he has for the police, some of which overlap on some of the responsibilities that we seem to have under the Road Traffic Act 1988. Is there anywhere in the council where we have a similar strategy on road safety, or even a policy statement with outcomes?
Simon can help out with this one, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The existing strategy that's in the current LTP, which is in the process of being rewritten, it obviously falls into 2 elements. You've got the educational element, which Judy deals with, which is the promotion of road safety advice across the county. And you've got the engineering element, which I deal with, which is how we look at and attempt to improve instances of collisions and casualties across the county through engineering measures on the floor. Speed limits is obviously part of that. The engineering treatments themselves are generally a more robust treatment, such as junction improvements, bend improvements, rather than solely relying on TROs. In order to undertake that, what we do every year is we analyse all of the accident records that we hold for Herefordshire. Now, we get those weekly. They come from the police. They used to come direct from the police to us. Now they go from the police to the Department of Transport, and they release that data to all local authorities, and you can stipulate whether you get the collision data weekly, monthly, etc. It's open. But no, we've always chosen to have it weekly. That populates our accident database, which is a computer-based system which holds all the records of personal injury. Now, that's not, you will obviously hear killed and seriously injured is the buzz phrase in road safety and has been for years. Now, obviously, killed speaks for itself. Seriously injured, basically in the breakdown from the Department of Transport, means any broken bone will class it as a serious injury. We also hold and always have slight injury, and that is what we use as well as KSIs to analyse. So we've got, I think it's roughly 29,000 records dating back to 1979 for the whole of Herefordshire. Now, obviously, we don't look at those every year, but what we would do is analyse the previous 5 years, and that will produce a list of locations where we get a let's say multiple numbers of collisions. That forms the basis for initial investigation to see what has actually happened at those locations, and that's contained within the data that we hold on the system. So contributory factor codes, the speed limit, the involvement, the weather conditions, any factors that the police officer who was in attendance may have felt that was worth recording in that data. So it's more than just there's a collision at the location. It is what has actually happened at that location. So that drives the engineering side, and then what will then happen is across the course of the year we will carry out detailed investigation at as many of those sites as we can get to, and where that investigation actually shows that there's an improvement in infrastructure, so physical material of the road, then we will try and action that as best we can within the financial year. And obviously any scheme that generates a potential fix that is bigger than the budget will cope for can get pushed forward for larger schemes in the future.
I mean, that's certainly about reacting to what is happening on the ground and from an operational point of view. If I can just touch upon in the report, under the legal implications, the three, shall we say, legislative responsibilities on Herefordshire under the Road Traffic Act. One is to take steps both to reduce and prevent accidents. Mm-hmm. That seems to me to suggest a much more proactive approach in terms of something similar to what the Police and Crime Commission is trying to do in terms of trying to set out priorities for how you would actually achieve that. I mean, I understand that the evidence and the data is very important in terms of how you actually might split the funding or how you might actually react to that in terms of the operational side of it. But I would have thought there's more to that than simply the data that you have on accidents across the county. Section 39.2 says that the local authority must prepare and carry out a programme of measures designed to promote road safety and make contribution towards the cost of measures for promoting road safety by other authorities or bodies. And then section 39.3, which is very much the area that you've been covering as well, though I'll be interested to see what you've got to say about the other two, must carry out studies into accidents arising out of the use of vehicles on roads or part of roads other than track roads within their area. And in the light, these studies take such measures as appear to the authority to be appropriate to prevent such accidents. See, it seems to me, and maybe, I mean, I understand that that you do have the local transport plan, and I have actually looked, David, at the current draft, and there are obviously statements in there about road safety, but I just don't get a feel, and I don't know what you think, members, as well, that there's a policy context for these three legislative responsibilities that are laid to us, and I'd be interested to know whether that's a deliberate choice by us over the years or whether it's just something that we haven't thought was actually of value. Does anyone want to come in at this point? David? Yeah.
All I was going to say, Councillor, is LTP is currently out for consultation, so I'll be expecting feedback on that into that consultation process about the policy framework for road safety. But I wondered if it would be useful for Julie to take you through what she does in terms of road safety education in that kind of the obligation we have to try and reduce awareness and prevent. I don't know if Scrutiny would be interested, the committee would be interested in that. Is that okay?
And Chair, sorry, just chipping in, it's obviously not just Julie, so it's Julie from our side, but there's also work that we do with the fire and the police. So yeah.
Yeah, so my role does follow the LTP guidance. So the idea is that it's a life cycle of road safety education starting at the earliest point. So I visit children's centres to speak to parents about how to protect their babies when they're travelling, through primary schools, high schools, and I work with my partners in fire and rescue and police, delivering pre-driver passenger safety to young road users, and then through to older drivers that have a particular session that we can offer subsidised by the council to improve and refresh their skills on the road.
Hannah, did you want to add to this before I come back to this idea of the strategy?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having us. So the prevention is one of our core strategies linked to our community risk management plan. One of the core elements that we work on is to prevent road traffic collisions and death and serious injury from road traffic collisions. From a fire perspective, and we have data should you need it, obviously we only attend certain road traffic collisions, not all of them, but the data that we have certainly says that the incidents we attend are usually, unfortunately, involving males aged between 16 and 25, and then more mature drivers over 60. So working with partners, what we do is we target our prevention initiatives. So we work on things, for example, year 10 students, we go into schools with partners to deliver a Your Impact session with using virtual reality headsets. We've updated it recently, so they can be immersed in what it feels like, what the hazards are they need to be aware of as a driver, as a passenger, to embed that awareness at a really early age. And certainly we've been trialling for more mature drivers, again using the virtual reality headsets, some work with cohorts of more mature drivers, just to again put them into the VR zone where they need to therefore anticipate things and be mindful of some of the health conditions that they might be facing in terms of becoming more aware. We've also started to work with the youth justice system as on a pilot for young people that may have been unfortunately in the youth justice system for driver relating issues, again to use our the VR headsets, for example, again to kind of make them more aware of their responsibilities whilst driving. So very much based on the data, we do try and target initiatives, and we really do value the work we do with partner agencies to collaborate as much as we can to deliver those initiatives.
So it sounds like there's that strong policy base. I'm also interested in that evidence base, and I'm concerned about the data being flawed in two ways. First of all, that you mentioned so many minor incidents, the police are never in attendance, you know, people just swap their insurance details. So how are we really making sure that we're covering the areas, the junctions, but also the types of people that really we need to be intervening with? And I'm aware that the police have, I use it myself, the West Mercia reporting for near misses and dangerous driving, and that doesn't show up in our data at all, and I know it's not publicly released. So I wonder if there are ways that maybe we are receiving that data, or that we should, to make sure that we are targeting absolutely the right people in the right places. And then the second flaw that I see is that, which links into policy, that the new draft LTP talks about how important people's feelings are about safety and how therefore they act as a motorist or as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, the extent to which they're likely to take up walking and cycling. And I don't see where we're gathering that data about people's perception of risk and safety and that impact that it's having on their behaviour, because that feels like a really important thing to me to feed into all of this as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just to provide you with some assurance, really, particularly from the authority and where we get our data from. So we just
Tom, could you put your mic towards you? Thank you.
Is that better? Sorry. So we've just recently put our community risk management plan out for public consultation and had that back. And just to provide really the council with some assurance on where we do get our data from. So the NFCC, the National Fire Chiefs Council, have just produced some guidance and some risk methodologies, particularly with light of the RTC, or road traffic collision data. So we actually pull all our risk methodologies from the Stats 19, which the police use, also from the Highways Network road data, and also from Ordnance Survey, Public Sector Government Agreements, etc., etc. So we actually pool all our targeting from quite a broad range of data now. So it's not just coming from fire specific. We've got really quite an all-encompassing data set now, if that helps.
Just double check, does that mean that it's including the near miss and the dangerous driving reporting that individuals are?
Not so we
Right.
take it from the same data sets possibly as some of the, so it's the Home Office data set of the IRS or the Incident Reporting System. So again, similar categories of KSIs, seriously injured and slight injuries as well.
Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to go back to Simon, and I'd like to congratulate you on the work you're doing. I think it's very good and very important. There is one aspect of it. You're identifying locations where there appears to be a problem from your data, but that doesn't take into account the other causes of accidents, which are behaviours, which of course can occur anywhere. They don't necessarily always occur in the same sort of places. Do you have a specific way of looking at driver behaviours that are causing problems in the county? Does that come into your calculations?
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. We're going to get into, obviously with what data is available, we're going to start to get to a national level about how it's recorded through the police forces and the crash reporting system. Now, behaviours per se, without any collisions there, and just going back to where we started, obviously, if we've got a lot of locations where we already know we've got a developing pattern of high numbers of collisions, we really should go there and try and stop those happening first and foremost. It's difficult to find the information that I know where you're coming from with what you're saying, but it's where would we get that from? And at the moment, the sources of that are fairly limited. Now, there are systems being developed, I think, through AI that are using the geospatial data that's picked up by Bluetooth on cars, where they can predict incidents of sudden braking. And there's a company, I think, around at the moment that are trying to promote this. What's always been said in the past is if you've got a finite level of resources, if you need to go and target those areas where you've got a really defined problem first and foremost before you can afford to go out and then tackle the rest. And I don't think, I've been doing this for 30 odd years now, so we've never got to a point where we've run out of places where we need to go and fix that have got a collision problem. It would be lovely if we had the levels of resources to enable us to do some, if you like, preventative. It's all preventative in a way, but some of it is reactive. But it's where we would get that information from, and that's not immediately clear at this point in time because it's a national level. We can only utilise national level data, which is all governed by how the DFT ask for it to be recorded, and they've reviewed the casualty data. It gets what they call a quinquennial review, so every it is 5 years, isn't it? Yeah, I think. And they'll review what goes into and what they ask to be recorded, and it's just recently been reviewed, which it can change the contributory factor codings that they use. It changes the playing field. They also did a major review back in 2015 when crash came in. And what that did is change the severity ratings. So what the Department for Transport said is that you cannot compare pre-2015 with 2015 and onwards. Now, West Mercia Police were a very early uptaker. They were one of the, sort of the beacon authorities that took on crash very early. So Herefordshire's data from 2015 onwards was when crash came in. A lot of authorities now are still not at that point where they're literally just transitioning into the use of crash data, but we've been in it for 10 years, and that's changed the numbers massively, so it's really difficult to compare. But coming back to your original point, it's where would we get that information from at this point, and I honestly don't know the answer to that at the moment.
Could I just follow up by saying then that I think it's important to take another look at that, because behaviours is something that I'm sure you're doing with education. Of course, you're trying to teach people about the right behaviour to avoid getting involved in an accident, but it is nevertheless important. And when, for example, the police are looking at somewhere to do speed enforcement or some other form of enforcement, they would look, I hope, at the general area rather than always at the specific spot, because these things can happen for the same causes, you know, at different places. For example, drink driving. If somebody has an accident because they've had alcohol in their system or drugs in their system, they're not going to always have that accident in the same place, but they might have it in the same area. And we know that we've already got areas in the county which are more prone to problems with drink or drug driving. So I think it should be part of the decision making to look at behaviours. I do accept it's difficult then to pin that down, and we've got limited resources. The same thing about what Helen said about how people feel about whether they're safe or not. Yeah, that's a bit of a challenge too, because you know, that would be, you'd have to do something everywhere if you're going to try and achieve that. So if we could just note that for future reference, thank you.
I can just add that as part of the analysis that we do, obviously we talk about sites a lot. It's just part and parcel of the industry. What we also do every year is review all of the A and B road network broken down into node lengths, so sensible. So, for example, the A44, which is, I don't think is that in your area, out to the west? We break that down into sections of route based on where we know that the traffic flow changes. So we would look at Worcester to Bromyard as one section, Bromyard to Lempster as another section, and then Lempster to the Welsh boundary, because the traffic flows vary between those three significant sections, and that will give you a different rate. So what we will look at is rates of collisions rather than just numbers, and it will give you an accident rate based on the amount of vehicles using it. That in itself tends to flag a longer length, and you will then look at the collisions to see if you get similar patterns in sorts of behaviours, and that may be that we will see a higher incidence of drink driving in those collisions. So it may well be concentrated in a 2 mile area on one of those sections. So it isn't just pinpoint sites. There is a lot of analysis. But again, it all comes down to resources and what we've got to work with and capacity to actually do this.
And finally, if I may, just to finish off, I'm going on a bit. Sorry, am I only allowed 3? The drink driving thing. I about a couple of years ago, it may not still be the case, but the place in the country which had the highest number of drink driving prosecutions per registered driver was Kington, the Kington area, and second was Lempster in the whole country. That's great, actually. I've got no argument with that, except that very few people in the pubs in those areas know that. And if they knew that, there wouldn't be so many of it. So I think you should publicise those sort of facts, because it helps to be a preventive measure. The times I've been having a drink, somebody says, have another one, you'll be all right. The police are never around here. And actually they are. So just as a little addition.
Yes, I did say we'd be flexible, Councillor Highfield, of course. Yes. Ed, and then I'll bring Councillor Heathfield in.
Yeah, it was just, I suppose Simon's covered part of it, Chair, but obviously in the report we talk about the different categories of road user that we see issues with. So obviously that's getting picked up from the stats. So like Simon said, it's not just about the location specifically, but when you start talking about behaviours, it's those different road user types. So I think it's in paragraph 5 where we talk about, we see across the county 20% of casualties associated with powered 2-wheel road users, 25% young adult road users that was referenced earlier, 30% with the old road users. So that obviously then links in with the work that Julie's doing, the campaigns that the police run as well. So Bob might want to chip in a bit more on that. So he knows a lot more about it than I do. But and then obviously in the report, in terms of where we're talking about the equality duty, so paragraph 29, nationally as well, we know, from data sets as well, where we see patterns, I suppose, or where we see greater tendency for things to happen with particular groups. So I think somebody mentioned earlier about young males. And sadly you see those different categories coming out in terms of how people use the road, and then that obviously influences the programmes and the interventions that we try and run. I think in the police strategy it talks about the fatal 4 as well. So you got driving at speed still being one of those major issues. And in the report we say, you know, that's obviously the main thing that people raise time and time again with the police and obviously with ourselves. We still obviously get people, or more people, driving whilst they're distracted. So obviously mobile phones and other things within the vehicle. And like Councillor Highfield's alluded to, driving under the influence. So alcohol obviously is one that people probably think about more, but drugs over the years has sort of probably come up more, I would say. And then also, sadly, I probably find it hard to believe that people still not wearing a seatbelt, even though that's been around for a long time since that intervention came in. So I suppose it's when those collisions, those casualties occur, it's not just about the location and the physical reasons why maybe potentially, but it's about those behaviours and what we find when we get there as well. So
Yes, I'll bring you in a minute, Councillor Heath, but I just want to summarise. I'm not saying, Ed, Simon, or anyone else, that the elements aren't there. I mean, what I liked about the PCC strategy, it brought it all together in one place. I do accept, David, that some element of that strategy is actually also in the LTP5 draft that's going forward. But I was very taken by the PCC strategy, and it did overlap with some of the responsibilities that I read out earlier on in terms of what we're responsible for. And I still feel there may be a recommendation there, though obviously it'll be up to members to agree, from us, to at least have you to think about whether you should replicate something like the PCC road safety strategy to give you that context and to actually allow you to bring together all these various strands you've been talking about in terms of those areas that influence the way you actually target your resources, target your efforts, target your prevention. And I just feel that that would be something that might be of benefit to officers as well as to the Cabinet, beyond the LTP even, which it goes much wider. But that's something for the committee to decide in terms of its recommendation. And I will go on to speed limits shortly, but I'll bring in Councillor Heathfield before we finish this first objective.
I just want to pop quickly back to my first question of the near miss and dangerous driving data. Is there any way that can be shared with the council? And yeah, do you think that could be useful? And what are we collecting towards the draft local transport plan? I think especially in our city and the 5 market towns, about how people's perceptions of risk and safety in those more built up areas.
Yes, first and foremost, we have campaigns and all through the 12-month periods, and also seasonal as well. Obviously, our education, training and media department handle all that. We have European and national campaigns that we subscribe to as well in West Mercia. We have drink, drive and drug campaigns. We have the Fatal 4 that Ed's touched on. We're regularly, well, in fact, it's 12 months of the year, targeting on mobile phones, speeding, the other, you know, the four together, and as I say, that's a 12-month thing, and backing on that, we've got all these different campaigns. As I say, we're targeting all the time. When and where required. I mean, if I could just take back to what Julie and Anna mentioned, we all work very closely together, and our education, training and media team are always involved with Julie and Anna on initiatives. I think Anna mentioned about getting into the schools and that sort of thing. We've got a green light program where in Herefordshire we went into different schools in Herefordshire, and we had just under 1,300 children, young people aged between 16 and 18. We delivered 1,300 to 1,300 pupils about the green light program, which is about safety and coming onto the road, driving
when they're coming on, passing their tests, and they get educated in that side of things, of the responsibilities on the road, and obviously alcohol, drugs, and this sort of thing. So, and we deliver that, as I say, to 1,300 pupils in Herefordshire. And as I say, they also do the head gear, which I think, Anna, you mentioned. That's for 14-year-olds, isn't it? That's a year 10. So they basically reconstruct a collision. I think with the fire brigade, you actually develop that, and these kids get that to see what it's like at a collision and what the emotions are and all the different things. So that's basically a potted down version of what we do. But as I say, our road policing units are all targeted every month. They're tasked at where we're informed by the local policing teams where they want somebody to look at certain issues. We target the roads on a monthly basis, send our road policing units, our motorcycle teams to those areas, not necessarily just about speed, it can be other, where other things are showing up as well. So we task every month. And of course, again, that's seasonal. It can be very much seasonal. We get a lot of complaints about motorcyclists this time of year from April through till end of September. So we're targeting them now. And we've got as I said, we've got various campaigns. You touched, sorry, Councillor, Heath-Smith, is it?
I'm Highfield, this is
Okay, yeah, sorry, Councillor Highfield. That's right, I wouldn't argue with that. We basically, when it comes to behaviours, you've obviously heard of Operation Snap. Have you all used Operation Snap? That is one of the areas where we encourage members of the public to use their dash cams to report any poor driving. So that's a behaviour, and that they're doing that. And I've got some figures here for Operation Snap. It's basically in February. I mean, it's up till February. From July last year to February this year. I mean, in August last year we had 580 submissions in a month. February we had 386. So we arrange generally between 300 and 600 submissions a month across the force. That's not just Herefordshire, that's across the force. And we get 35% will be that probably from cyclists with their head cams, close pass, that sort of thing. And we get a lot of behaviours when it comes to overtaking solid double white lines on the road, all this sort of thing. So that's all looked at. We've got people that make the decisions on whether to prosecute, to caution, to NFA. So your behavioural is answered in some way by the public ringing in and submitting their various dash cams. So we are doing quite a lot, both educationally and on the road as well, operationally as well, throughout the year.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I should say that the committee is aware that those killed and seriously injured on the roads are falling in Herefordshire, so we'd like to draw attention to that for anyone looking in, and that's good, but obviously we are hoping that that can be driven down even more. Before I bring you in, Councillor Peabody, I'm very conscious, and it's reflected in the Policing Commission strategy about partnership working. I'm very conscious, you talk about Bob, you talk about Anna, you talk about Julie, about partnership working at that operational level. Do we have any regular meetings between the authority, the police and the fire and rescue service on road safety at a more strategic level? No, Bob, if you want to answer it, you can start.
Yeah, each of our areas, with obviously Herefordshire is what we're about today. Herefordshire, we have an operations forum quarterly with all the partners, Simon, Julia, Anna, 10, and the idea is if there are any issues that are thrown up in Herefordshire, we discuss it at the forum. I think we try and do 4 a year, but it's more realistically 3. And if there's anything to discuss together, we'll look at it, and whether that's the council, fire, police, jointly, we're hopefully on it. I mean, the idea is if there's anything in this of a particular concern, we escalate it up to a operational level. However, if it's one that we think it's got a lot of impetus, we can go to a strategic level, and that's at this moment in time where we're trying to get a strategic. It's in its infancy, but we're trying to get to a strategic level where all the senior officers from all our partners as well as the police get together, and if we've got something that's really concerning us, the idea is to get together and try and resolve it and that way at a strategic level.
Bob, do you think it'd be useful for this committee to have a recommendation along those lines to reinforce what you're trying to do, or are you happy that you have the support of the council in moving forward on that?
I'm not covering Herefordshire at the moment. I haven't done for 10 years, but Simon, you go to those meetings. I mean, anything that's of a concern, we look at together, and when it goes to strategic in the near future, hopefully. I think the invites have got to go out yet to the senior levels, but that's the idea, is that when there is a particular issue that they think all the resources need to be put together, then that will happen. But it all starts off with the forum, the forum where all the partners at the lowest level discuss, and then we can escalate it as and when we feel there's a particular issue.
Simon, do you want to come in at this point and add to anything? Because I'm conscious that if we can do anything as a committee to help you in terms of moving forward on this, in terms of partnership working, I'm more than happy to do so.
Yeah, there used to be it was called the Strategic Partnership Board many years ago, when the Safer Roads Partnership, as it was formerly called, came into being, because obviously when it first appeared, it was funded by the authorities, so there was a Strategic Partnership Board. Over time, the Strategic Partnership Board, I think when the councils then didn't fund, because it's entirely police funded, I think I'm right in saying, the Strategic Partnership Board actually folded over time. So what we were left with is the Operations Forum, which is now it's inspector level at the police, isn't it, Bob? And obviously Ed attends from, you're the highest level from our side, aren't you? But it is more of a day-to-day, what we do, where we do it, how we do it. That's the discussion of that one. But there probably is elements where there could be higher level discussions, and touching on Councillor Heathfield's point about the behavioural data comes back slightly to from when I said where would we get it from. Well, what I'm thinking is but this would have to be a strategic decision by the police. So if, and this is thinking on the hoof now, if where those Operation SNAP requests came in, if they were plotted on a computer system with where is this, that would give an incidence of behavioural issues that don't necessarily relate in a collision. But obviously that's going to then take a huge proportion of police resources to probably undertake that, because they get the submissions in from the public, and then they would have to do something with it to put it onto a mapping system, let's say GIS based. Then we, if that was going to be shared with us, we would have to have a system that would accommodate. So you can see that's a strategic level decision that would need to be taken rather than an operational one. So that, and just to show what the Operations Forum generates. So back in 2019, On the back of the route investigations that we've been doing, we tried a new approach, which was to look at routes where we were aware that there was let's say, an issue with driving behaviour that probably manifested in speeding and irresponsible behaviour as much as casualties. And what we did is we looked at all of the casualties on the route, and this is, Bob won't remember it because I don't think, were you? No, I don't think you were. A4110, which runs up from Hereford up to Lentwardine. And what we did is we analysed everything that was going on and looked at the contributory factor codes to see where we got collisions, not necessarily in one location, so you wouldn't go in and be looking at it in its entirety, but we were looking for one of the codings. There's a number of codings in there that relate to irresponsible driving behaviour, so it can be excess speed, careless, reckless, driving too fast for conditions. And what we did is we broke down all the collisions on that route to see how many, even though they weren't necessarily interlinked apart from they were on that length of road, they did have that factor in them, which sort of implies that there's a behavioural issue going on, and that generated an enforcement campaign, which we undertook some engineering to enable enforcement locations to be utilised. Now that is a problem. Obviously, the bulk of the enforcement in West Mercia and in Herefordshire is done via van or motorcycle, which they have for use in the summer months primarily. They don't use the motorcycle in the.
No, providing it's a dry day, not too cold.
Yeah.
Go out on the bikes, yeah.
But obviously, if you're going to use the van, you need to have somewhere to park it that's safe, and it has to be operationally sound, and the risk assessments have to be ticked. So what we did is we undertook some engineering works to help provide hard stand locations for the vans. We then agreed on a backup poster campaign, because contrary to popular opinion, I mean, it is not about catching people for speeding. What it is about warning people that there's a threat of that, because you won't change people's behaviour if they don't know that anything's going on. And that campaign we ran it for 3 years, roughly speaking. Unfortunately, COVID obviously threw a massive curveball into that, because it changed all the travel from 2020 onwards. So it was really difficult to review the data to get any meaningful comparisons, because everything changed all of a sudden. But that's what the Operations Forum can generate, and that was definitely a partner operation. So the police did the enforcement, we did some engineering, and jointly did the sort of the educational bit, which was poster messages. It's something that we'd probably like to do again, but all of this comes down to its resources on both sides and having the ability. Obviously the police have a finite number of vans with enforcement that they can do. We've got to justify where we're asking, and you've got to take data before you go there to understand what's actually happening. It has to be data led, because you can't, without the data to start with, it's really difficult to prove if you've actually made a difference. You may have spent a heavy, high level of resources actually undertaking this piece of work, but if somebody says, has this worked, how do you measure it?
Okay, thank you, Simon. Do you want to come in on this point, Tom? Because I'm conscious Councillor Peabody been waiting for ages to make a point.
Just very quickly, a point of note for Councillor Heathfield regarding targeting for behaviours. A proportion of the RTCs that we do see are of people passing through our county, so particularly on motorcycles and things like that, and on the beautiful holiday we just had, on the bank holidays and the weather, they don't actually reside in Herefordshire, so targeting for behaviours perspective does become quite difficult just for that proportion of casualties.
Thank you.
To get onto speed limits.
Yeah, well, we've learnt how important the data is, and also how that approach where you've looked beyond just collision data into behaviour as well actually had a really good outcome. And so I understand everything you're saying about how important it is to direct the resources where you know there's a real issue, but I just wonder if we can widen the way we look at data, whether it might actually show us that we should be prioritising different things possibly. And it seems to me that the police are collecting a lot of data about behaviour which would be really useful to us beyond just KSI data. And I also read in the local cycling wheeling improvement plan that we've actually collected data about perception as well, about how
people can feel excluded from active travel because they feel our roads are dangerous. So I think we've possibly got access to a much broader base of data beyond just KSIs that might actually see us changing the way we prioritise where our resources are.
So I think a lots of work that we do in this space isn't, because we aren't, it's not like we're a primary research organisation. So a lot of the statements we make are kind of industry accepted research. So, you know, it's not, oh, DFT accepted research. It's not necessarily that we go out and do research because we're not really geared up for that as an organisation particularly. So the data we collect will be on, particularly on the back of other things that happen. So I don't know, but I think when we talk about perceptions of safety for cyclists and active travel, I think that's not a Herefordshire specific thing. I think we can take industry accepted issues about how people think actually that's a dangerous thing to do. I mean, you hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. People telling me that the roads around Herefordshire are more dangerous. It's their perception of safety. I'm not in a position to say they are or they aren't. So I think, yes, I think that's probably one of the things that councils across the country need to tackle is how do we help people with that perception of what that safety is. And of course, it doesn't take much to have that perception confirmed by whatever kind of media might be floating around that doesn't like things like active travel. So it's quite an uphill battle, I think, as an industry. I don't mean specifically Herefordshire, but the LTP. I'm hoping we will make sure the LTP addresses perception of safety, or at least gives us a policy bedrock for which we can start to think about how do we tackle that, but doing it in isolation doesn't seem to me the way to do it. I think we work with neighbours and other authorities that are in different positions and maybe further ahead in terms of their active travel and how they're tackling perceptions of safety. You know, we know things like people say, oh, I don't want to let my kids cycle to school because it's really dangerous, so I'll take them in the car. You know, well, actually, the reason you're not doing it is because of all the car driving. Because your perception is that it's much safer to be in the car than it is to be on a bike. So that's kind of a challenge for us, for everyone. That's not just a challenge for Herefordshire Council.
Councillor Thomas?
I think it's wonderful, all these figures we've got, but are we using them? Is road engineering keeping up with this? I have 3 examples. One in my ward, which is Lock's Garage, which I know Ed he's lost a lot of hair over, I'm pretty certain. That was changed, I think, probably 13 or 14 years ago, the junction.
2015.
Oh, 2015, was it?
I think the last amount of work, which was the installation of the refuges.
Right. Well, in the opinion of both the parish councils, because that comes right on the division between Allensmore, well, actually 3, Much Church and Kilpeck, in their opinion, and this is discussed quite regularly at the parish council meetings, they consider that junction to be, after the improvements were made, that junction became far more dangerous. Now, they're on the ground, they see the accidents. The chairman of one of the parish councils lives at just literally around the corner from Lock's Garage, so she obviously does know. Now, classic example, on here you've got about Rose Cottage, Landon Abo. Now that's a junction I use daily. The problem there isn't signage or anything else. It's large, it's very great, a lot of HGVs trying to get out onto A49 off the 434A. Your signage doesn't do anything for that problem at all. And another thing, which is very close to where I live, is Little Pengesfleet turning. Now that was redesigned again. You'll probably be able to tell me, Simon, how many years ago? Not that many years ago. And it's, again, I use that a bit. That is incredibly dangerous. The whole engineering made it more dangerous, not much safer. Lorries turning onto the Monmouth Road, the Simmons-Yatt Road, if they're mid-axle trailers, they come right across the carriageway going to Ross. And I've seen, in my own experience, 2 where lorries have actually caught cars. There was a bad accident there the other day when a friend of mine got sort of a car coming out of, because, so therefore design, are we actually, some ideas come out, are they good designs? Because both the two, I give an example, Pengestley and Locks Garage, altered. They're both in the opinion that everybody that lives around there much more dangerous. So where are we going with this?
Before someone comes in, that touches upon our second objective, which is looking at best practice on road architecture in the context of road safety measures. So if someone's going to answer what Councillor Thomas has said specifically, I'd be interested to know how much we look across the country as to what is best practice in terms of some of these engineering solutions. So if you could cover that as well, please, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Thomas. Let's touch on two of the ones that you mentioned, because we fortunately have an answer. They're both trunk roads. So the A49 with Rose Cottage is actually, and that's all managed by National Highways. Same with the Pengestley junction, which is 4137. Is that the one where the 4137 leaves the A49? Yeah, we don't get any say in the design elements of what they do with those junctions, so it's purely down to them. If we go back to Locks Garage, so Locks Garage has been a feature of a site with a lot of collisions on it for many years, decades. It's obviously gone through various changes over the years. It's principally looking at the accident data that we've got now. It's now in for a larger improvement simply because it is still high profile. But what we know from the accident data is it's high profile, but it is better than it was 10 years ago. Even though it's still at the top of the list, the levels of collisions have come down and the severities relatively have come down, but it still gets more than everywhere else. So if you looked back in the early 2000s, you would have probably seen a level of collisions that was even higher than you get now. And the problem itself is principally down to you have a junction that operates and a very busy petrol filling station, which is a massive community hub. And the difficulty with that location is differentiating the movements of who is using the garage and who is using the junctions. Unfortunately, some of that is contributed to by drivers' own behaviours of not using indicators or using them inappropriately at the wrong moments, such as indicating to enter the garage prior to enter, and drivers believe that they are using the junction. They take the opportunity to go, believing that the traffic will have turned left, only to find that that driver actually means that I wish to turn left into the petrol filling station after I've passed you. So that it's a behavioural issue that's not helped by the physical layout. Now, what we said when we did the previous treatment, the level and the severity level of the collisions, because you had what we would term in the industry acceleration and deceleration lanes as you exited the B4348 and entered, what that was actually doing was allowing drivers to exit at speed, which is the principal issue, which then produces no deceleration effect on the following vehicle. So it was when the collisions happened, the impact was higher. So when we did that treatment with the limited budget that we had back then, the idea was to get rid of the acceleration and deceleration lanes, because they are an industry design from probably the 70s and 80s and before, when it was all about keeping traffic moving. What we found over the years is that as traffic levels increase, standard junctions such as Locks Garage and the level of movements, it struggles to cope, unfortunately. And what you don't want is traffic able to make entries and exits faster. You want to actually slow them down, because that will and physically slow each other down. So the refugees prevented overtaking, because there were elements of overtaking going on through the junction in the original right turn bays that were there. That was why that was put in. Now, I'll address the question before somebody brings it up, which is why didn't we put a speed limit on there? What we see with speed limits, unfortunately, is if you put them in inappropriate locations, you can actually make the collision elements worse, because unless they're going to get robust enforcement constantly, it can increase frustrations in drivers and lead to more instances of overtaking because there's frustrations. It's just a sad fact of life that that's where we've got to. It doesn't always work, because the thinking is that when you put a speed limit in, everybody drives to that speed limit, and unfortunately it's never been the case, and I think that it probably never will be the case until autonomous vehicles and speed restriction exists.
But staying with road architecture, I was talking about best practice, but before I go on to best practice, when we're looking at a design solution, do we involve the fire authority and the police in a debate on the design solution?
We will discuss, we discussed design, we haven't spoken, we don't generally deal with the fire authority, because obviously it's an engineering, there's a lot of elements that we have to deal with. So you've got design standards that are national standards, so design manual for roads and bridges. So sometimes there aren't many options out there. You've got to work within the constraints of the national guidance as to what designs you can physically put on the ground, and that governs alignments and gradients, and there's all manner of elements. We have discussed with police, such as when so probably one of the most high profile schemes that's been completed in the last 3 years would be Old Gore Crossroads, a signalisation of, which was 2022. And we did consult with the police, obviously consulted over that. Now that did have a speed limit go along with it. That was to actually help the design standards accommodate, or to accommodate the design that we could fit, because obviously making it a 40 reduces the need for the visibility elements and some of the widths, and there's a number of elements that change. Now what we know with that one is that the control mechanism, you were saying about what we look at nationally, so national design of a signalised crossroad such as that would actually tell you to do it slightly differently to how we have. Now the reason we've done it that way is that we've in Herefordshire over many years, so going back to probably late 90s and then early 2003, we've got three or four junctions where we've used a control system in signals, which, for want of a better term, it's single arm operation. So only one arm only ever operates. Now national design standards would dictate that you run two arms opposite each other and they can turn off. What we found with rural signals, and there's one urban one in the city at Tillington Road, is that the collision levels by doing single arm operation, it's all, well, I hate to say perfect, I will say touch wood, we get very few collisions from a single arm operation, and obviously when we did Old Gore, it was utilising a MOVA system, so it's on a detector, so it can detect who's approaching the crossroads, and you don't get this system where it rotates and you end up sitting there for 5 minutes waiting for your arm to go when there's nothing else coming. And I think the use of that technology over the last 20 odd years has actually helped us generate something that we're happy to use in other locations. And that is a discussion about Locks Garage now, about whether we can make that work with what's there and this is important, accommodate the garage. Because at no point is there going to be anything done that's detrimental to the garage. So any designs will be specifically set out to make sure that it maintains the garage operation. Because obviously we can't change anything within the garage forecourt. So we need to accommodate that in whatever we do.
I'll just make a point before you come in, Councillor Thomas. So are you saying that looking at best practice across the country isn't always an effective way of working then? That's what you seem to be saying, Simon. It's quite an interesting point because it's not one that I'd picked up, because I did wonder.
I think it's important that you always review and see what is going on out there, but actually, and you factor that in. I mean, over the years when these elements have been done, when junctions have been done, it was utilising best practice, but then ultimately maybe adding your own element to it to say, well, let's try this. But which I know when the signalised junction arrangements that we've sort of used successfully were discussed, they were initially viewed back in the late 90s when Tillington Road was done as, will this actually work? And we've got a similar situation with utilising a rural mini roundabout arrangement, which we've done at one location. Now, they're not used. Nationally, you won't find them used. We've pretty much successfully installed one in the north-west of the county. And that opens the door to probably trying to do more in future. But that didn't happen purely off our own ingenuity. It was utilising ideas that we'd seen elsewhere. So you're always reviewing what's going on in local authority areas all across the country all the time.
I do want to ask the fire authority and the police, are there instances where you both think you could input into any sort of design solutions? I'm interested to know whether you think you could. Bob?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we do liaise when we're aware, when we're asked to make comment, we will do that. We don't generally get involved with developments, but like Simon, if he wants to do something, he will liaise obviously with my colleague Ian Connolly, who covers Herefordshire. But before, years ago, when I was with Simon, we used to discuss any issues with the junctions or any other developments that may affect road traffic. So yes, we do liaise, and no doubt we'll continue to do so in the future.
Thank you. Oh, Anna first, then I'll bring in Councillor Thomas.
Hiya. Yeah, from a fire authority point of view, not necessarily. Obviously, what we have on locally are local crews. There might be on-call units or whole-time firefighter units who do attend those incidents where the fire brigade are called to help out or to cut people out of cars, for example. So locally, there might be some intelligence from that crew that works that patch day in, day out in terms of their local knowledge, because they're likely to be residents of that locality. But from a fire authority point of view, I think it's very difficult for the authority level to contribute at that level.
Thank you, Anna. Ed, and then I'll bring in Councillor.
Yeah, just very quickly. We obviously work with the police when we do road safety audits. So when we've made an improvement to a road layout, done some change, and we invite the police along on those visits, and they will contribute to that formal process. So that's basically making sure that what we're looking at is safe, but ultimately the stage when the police come out is when that scheme is on the ground. So if we're doing any works, anywhere around, then we'll ask them to come out and have a look, and also to they'll look at the report. And then the other point, I'm just trying to remember what it was going to be. When we do obviously have collisions, I know that Simon and the police will attend those sites as well and have a look at the particular circumstances behind them. So they do work quite closely. So I think going back to your earlier point about partnership working, I think from my point of view, it's very good at that operational level that everybody just really understands what they're there to do, and it sounds a bit strange, but they just get on with it and get it done, and they're very good at what they do, and in terms of that knowledge sharing and that partnership working.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, Simon. The Old Gold Crossroads, that is an amazing, but the amount of traffic that travels on those two roads compared with the A465 at Lock's Garage, you're talking about a motorway to a little country lane. Now, I disagree with you. You put a speed limit in Wormbridge because there were a lot of accidents outside Ford's Garage. Again, my ward. That, according to, again, the parish council, you've improved it tremendously. So why, that's a straight piece of road, you've got very similar things to Lock's Garage. Why is it you cannot have a speed limit on Lock's Garage, and why would you feel that wouldn't be effective?
I wasn't personally involved with Wormbridge. It was done, I wouldn't say before my time, but it was done by the original traffic team. They had it. It was 40, wasn't it? Through the. Is it still 40 or was it 30 now? I can't actually remember.
40.
40. Wormbridge was probably easier because it's a village environment and you've got more properties, and this is where you can make speed limits work. And what we've been doing, I'm sure some of you have seen the speed limits and how we've implemented them at, let's say, Ashburton on the A417 and Stretton Grandison, and which is, let's say, the new way of doing it, and what it seems to do is work better than all of the previous ways and measures that were ever done. Not forgetting, obviously, that the 465 used to be trunk road under governance of Highways Agency, as it was called back then, or National Highways today. So there was a very different sort of approach, and that's why that road, the A465, is probably designed as it is, with massively wide verges, and that's without Locks Garage. You've got very few properties in the vicinity of there, so trying to convince people to do what you want them to do without the ability to highlight the village is going to be difficult. That's the problem. Now, what I would say is that if a redesign and that involves signals is possible, it may well get the speed limit with it, because of all the extra infrastructure that's there. Then you create an environment that makes people realise that there's a reason for this speed limit, which probably you'd struggle to do at the moment. It's just an unfortunate fact of reality that changing the plates on the side of the road sadly doesn't do what we'd all wish that it did do, and there's no easy way around it at this point in time.
Okay. I've got two more objectives before I go back to speed limits, but I will want to bring the two cabinet members in at some time on funding, because I'm interested to know how funding then translates across to all your efforts here, because I got the feeling that funding was reactive rather than actually somebody sitting back and saying this is what we should be spending on road safety and this is how we should spend it. But I will touch upon that with the cabinet members. On the school safety initiative, Julie, I think we've probably touched upon that in some respects from what you were outlining that you did, and also Anna with the schools. But is there anything else you want to add on that? Are you?
We also manage the school crossing patrol service, which is a big benefit to parents, giving them reassurance that their children can cross busy roads to get to school without the use of a car. So that is part of the service as well of road safety education.
And I noticed from Neighbourhood Watch that there was about 5 or 6 magazines on safety.
From what, sorry?
Neighbourhood Watch, they had 5 or 6 magazines they drew attention to on safety aspects of using the road, young drivers, new drivers, child safety in terms of child seats.
Yes.
And I just wondered, did you get involved in that area as well in terms of talking about the proper use of child seats and other
That is part
aspects?
of my programme.
That is part of your programme as well?
Yes.
So it covers quite a wide range of different aspects of it, yes.
So right from nursery, so we have a resource that I can lend out free of charge to nurseries to get children to develop ideas about different ways of using the road. So through role play, through to speaking to parents, visiting parents at the council's children's centres when they have stay and play type groups, and sharing information and advice on how to keep their children safe within the car. So that is part of the role. As I said, a life cycle, ideally, of embedding road safety education and the idea of keeping themselves safe and active throughout their lives.
Yes, thank you. Anna, did you want to add to this? I think you're interested in perhaps get more involved in the schools in Herefordshire in terms of safety generally, yes?
Yeah, so we talked briefly about the Your Impact, which is a scheme that we, the fire service, deliver in school. So we go in and we with partners, and we engage Year 10 students, because in Year 11 they're very busy with exams, so Year 10 is better. So certainly we're really keen to promote that. So potentially, if I could use this forum to advertise that we would like to roll that out even further to even more secondary schools, or whether it's schools that support children with special needs, or whatever it might be. So certainly if that could be a message that I leave with the committee today, just to further promote that, and we can provide lots of information about how to access that, which I can circulate.
And how best could we help you with that? Through the local authority and its contacts with schools?
I guess, yeah. Anything, any engagement that you have with schools, head teachers.
So perhaps you and Julie could perhaps talk about that after the meeting?
Yeah, we can certainly keep engaging on that, definitely.
Because I think prevention here is so key to it, looking at these magazines about people understanding what the risks are, because often they don't understand what the risks are, particularly when they start driving, and that's what causes the chaos on the road that we do see from time to time. Councillor Peabody.
It's brilliant that the kind of education programme looks at all stages of life. And of course, here in Herefordshire, we have an ageing population. We have quite a lot of elderly people in rural locations. And those people that may have been good drivers can then become bad drivers. And I see that you have a programme for refreshing the sort of people over 60, is it, or over 70? Over 70. But the take-up is quite small, 36 people. And I wonder if the concern for an elderly person is that if they expose themselves to scrutiny, they're at risk of actually losing their licence. And in our rural community, where actually they're so reliant on the car, whether we should be looking at ways of supporting them to give up their licence where appropriate, but facilitate some other method for them to actually get about by partnering with community transport schemes or buses on demand or something like that. Do you recognise that that's probably an issue for someone who's very old and feels that they might be at risk of losing their licence if they go on a refresher course?
Yeah, it's very clear. And when I have, in fact, I've taken a call this morning that I wasn't able to answer, that I could see from the message that it was an older driver requesting a session. So I often have a very at-length conversation with older drivers when they phone up, and I make it absolutely clear that in no way, I hold no information about the assessment of that driver. They get a written assessment so that they can have some feedback and take it away with them and work on those points that have been highlighted through the session. And the instructor is very experienced at having a conversation with them where he can't advise, he can advise them. He has no other jurisdiction to enable that person to hand up their licence if he doesn't think that they are really able to continue. He might offer further sessions, but he will then discuss with them other means of getting themselves around, because obviously that they may rely on that to attend medical appointments, still have a social life, see friends and family. So we will have a conversation with them about that. So we're very clear that in no way does it jeopardise their licence, but it just makes them see from a point of view that isn't a family member telling them that they should give up their licence, and actually that from this person who is a professional driving instructor that has maybe made them think that they may need to give up their licence to protect themselves.
That's brilliant to hear. I still would maintain that those people who really feel that they might be at risk of losing their licence wouldn't take part in this programme. So you're dealing with people who are still good, active drivers. And since these drivers are quite a big factor in road safety, whether we shouldn't be looking at a scheme to persuade people that somehow that they should consider alternative methods.
Could be a recommendation.
Well, I'm hoping for some ideas, really.
Anna?
Thank you. So I think probably separately to the scheme that Julie's talking about, we're working with the police on mature drivers' engagement sessions using the VR headsets. At no point does anybody talk about licences coming off people as part of those sessions. And we've got another 3 sessions booked in Herefordshire this calendar year as well. And those sessions, they use the technology, the VR technology, to help drivers understand the changes that happen as we age and how that can affect driving. And I actually sat in on one of those sessions, one of the pilots last year, and it was really encouraging to be part of that group of people. The pilots that we've taken with the police have been really, really popular and really worthwhile. So I think we could certainly work on working with our partners in the police to kind of roll those out more so. They were really popular.
Yeah, I attend those as well.
I do.
Yeah.
Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose from my point of view, we've obviously got, you know, what we've been talking about this morning. We've got the data, so we understand what's happening, where things are happening, who's involved. We've obviously got, I think, probably, you know, a strong that sort of education, training, publicity side of things. I suppose it's that engagement within it. So you can go into schools and you can deliver to classes. You see numbers, but I suppose does it go in one ear and out the other? Hopefully, it stays there and people remember it. I suppose it's trying to get that engagement with those older groups where it's more voluntary. So I suppose from our side of things, it's probably making people aware that those opportunities, those courses are out there for people to go to, and I suppose that then ultimately comes back to the resource that we all have across the board. So yes, some of these courses might be sort of self-funded, that you know, you pay yourself to go on one, but I suppose it's how we publicise those courses. So and really try and encourage that uptake. But equally, you could probably spend some time and effort doing that, and it just comes down to whether somebody wants to sign up to it or not. But that's probably where the battle lies, probably rather than the content. You know, if there's VR headsets and all sorts out there, then that's probably one good start.
Bob, and then Councillor Highfield.
Yes, as Anna's already touched on, mature driver awareness sessions, which we've got four dates actually, according to me, but don't matter. Where mature drivers can go and put on the headsets, and I know they've been well received. But if you want a taste of it, I've just noticed here on Saturday the 7th of June and also Thursday 12th of June, we've got webinars for West Mercia mature drivers. And both webinars will be hosted by a chap called James Luckhurst, founder of Project Edward, you may be aware of that. And will feature a panel of experts, a West Mercia Rose police officer and a chap called Rob Hurd, chair of the National Older Driver Forum, will be on the panel. So if you wanted to take the opportunity of going on one of those webinars, at least you get a feel of what they're talking about. And it also involves families as well. So I think that's two good sessions coming up.
Yes, thank you for that, Bob. Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I wasn't aware of was that these mature driver courses cannot, there's no power to take people's licences away. I didn't know that. And I think Councillor Pebbody is quite right that a lot of people fear that that's what might happen to them and they depend on their car. So maybe, and I didn't know about these webinars either. And I'm a pretty mature driver. So I think publicity about what is out there, what it actually means, it doesn't seem to be sufficient, really. Do, for example, parish councils ever get details of these things? Because they tend to be older people with a big, wide network of older people. They would be able to spread the word. And it is the ones in the rural areas who are most dependent on their car and would be the most reluctant to give up, and would benefit from a course or advice. I mean, the advice is good. So could we look at publicity? Would that be a recommendation that we could look to that's more widely, because it's a very good initiative. So if it could be better publicised, so more people know about
if you want to put one forward, Councillor Highfield.
Well, should recommend that we look at ways of increasing the publicity of what's available for older drivers. And in particular, that they're not under threat simply by attending a course that they will only learn. They might get advice that they ought to take, but they're not forced to lose their licence if they choose to turn up. And I think that publicity is good, and that there are webinars and virtual opportunities around it would be good if we could, indeed, if the DVLA could somehow contact all older drivers and tell them about all this, that would be good too. I don't know if that's within our ability to make a recommendation.
Julia, then I'm going to bring in Councillor Peabody.
Yeah, the balance on that is that it's a very limited budget for the subsidising of the sessions.
Councillor Peabody, then I want to move on to TROs.
Yeah, I guess it's
and
just a
funded.
last point that I still think there are older drivers who probably know they shouldn't be driving and perhaps might be willing to give up their licence and make the roads a lot safer if they had some support to find alternative transport schemes. And I wondered if there was anything we could do to support that. So it's like an amnesty. You give up your license, but in return, you get a kind of travel plan, or you get some kind of financial support so that you can afford some taxis. Or I don't know. I just know that that's a very high risk group, and there's been a story recently about a man who shouldn't have been driving, was told by his optician that he shouldn't be driving, and he killed someone on the road. So yeah, it's about that group.
Although it's driver responsibility as well at the end of the day to decide whether they're fit to drive or not, and that's what the DVLA say. I mean, it's for you to actually tell them if you have any conditions, which means
But
you
if
should be
they
driving.
have no other travel alternatives in a rural county like that.
Well, we will be looking at buses in another forum. I do want to go on to TROs, or what we call traffic regulation orders. I know that's a way that we implement changes on the highway network, but I do wonder whether we, as a council, sit back through our road safety responsibilities and actually proactively think of TROs we should be bringing in ourselves to actually make changes on the highways. I know we get a lot of information from data. I know we get a lot of information from councillors. I've sponsored a few TROs in my time. Parish councils raise issues. But is there any sort of work within the council where you sit down and think, right, we could do something here to improve road safety, but we'll need a TRO and we will proactively fund it and take it forward?
I'll answer as much as I can, because luckily it's not necessarily specifically my area, but yes, we do. As I say, with some of the accident site treatments that we've done, and we've got one that's coming up this year where the decision to actually implement a speed limit along with the improvement at the principal crossroads that's in question, which is not Locks Garage, it's actually Upper Sapie High House, that will attract with it a speed limit that will take in a second site as well and the village, and that was based on an assessment of what the traffic was doing. Well, obviously speed data is taken on all the approaches to see what the general behaviour naturally is, and it was falling within an area where it probably could withstand and this is where the whole area of speed limits comes in. They need to have an element of self-enforcing nature for them to get respect, and that's where the speed data pretty much dictates where you may be able to get one of these in. And so yes, it does happen. It's not something that specifically over the years we've done a lot of, because as I said before, we haven't found, and actually if you look in the Department for Transport guidance on setting local speed limits in rural areas, they shouldn't be used for standalone locations, and then if you expand them without the right infrastructure around it, so in this situation there's a village very close to where the element is, and what if we did it for the junction itself, left a gap and then did the village, it would look ridiculous. So what we would do is join it up and try and join the measures up. So yes, it does happen, but the traffic team are more specifically dealing with TROs on a day-to-day basis.
So Simon, you wouldn't think a recommendation from us for the council to be more proactive in looking at the TRO process as a way of promoting road safety changes as being that effective then as a recommendation?
I would imagine it is already being considered there between
Okay.
the traffic. Yeah, you would normally look at any length of road where there are concerns, and a lot of the TRO process is reactive to parish councils, primarily, and requests for speeding. And obviously, the collision and casualty element will occasionally bring in elements where we would suggest that there's scope. But like I say, it doesn't happen very often. But it certainly doesn't. It's not as if everyone is sitting around waiting for somebody to request. It's a sort of an evolving process that's fluid across the year.
Ed, then I'm going to bring in Councillor Thomas and Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, sorry. So I suppose from my point of view, the team, Simon mentioned the traffic management team. So they do get a considerable number of requests each year for traffic regulation orders, and that can be speed limits, parking restrictions, anything like that. Sort of ban movements. So they will look at all of those, and they'll all have an element, I suppose, of road safety. But I guess sometimes they're not always taken forward. What's proposed. So there's that perception again that by introducing something it's going to help. It doesn't always necessarily have that. There might not be the evidence, I suppose, to support that change as well. So it's something that I can get you sort of a written response on to set out what we have and haven't done. And the haven't isn't a negative. The haven't is the as in there's a reason why something hasn't been introduced. So just because somebody rings up or emails in or fills out a web form asking for a speed limit change doesn't mean that it necessarily happens. So something that the team have tried to do more of over the last 12 months is to take the speed surveys, so to actually collect that data. So when it comes in, we get an early decision on whether a TRO, it's appropriate to progress it or not, rather than in the past it would maybe just sit on a list and wait for a long time, and then it was almost people felt that by default, because it had been sat on that list for a long time, that they should get something. So it comes back to what Simon was talking about earlier about whether it's appropriate to have one in that location. We've probably all driven through places where you maybe struggle from time to time to understand why that speed limit's set for a reason. And like Simon said, if it's set incorrectly, then it introduces that frustration and people do things that ultimately you don't want them to do.
Yeah. Actually, you could write to all members on that point about TROs, Ed, rather than just the committee, since I assume that all members have an interest in knowing what the process is and how decisions are taken from time to time. I think that would probably be more helpful. Councillor Thomas and Councillor Highfield, then I do want to go on to funding. And you want one as well, yeah. Councillor
Right,
Thomas.
TROs. Now, Much Dewchurch Parish Council are trying to get a TRO in Much Dewchurch. You have a school in the middle of it on an incredibly bad bend, on a very bad bit of road. The parish clerk shared all the emails, correspondence that she has had with whoever of you decide on TRO, and it, quite frankly, they almost giving up because it's just too complicated. We should have a policy. If there is a school in a village, 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I'm totally against 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in any other situation. But where there's a school, yes, don't make it difficult for them. I've seen pages after pages of pages of statistics and etc. that you people want. It's just putting them off. And sooner or later there's been minor shunts, but there's sooner or later going to be a very serious accident in that village, and probably a child's going to lose his life. And then who bears the responsibility of that? I can't understand TRO. I really can't understand why you make it so difficult.
Well, part of it's national legislation, I suppose, but I'll bring Councillor Highfield in here, and if you want to make a recommendation, Councillor Thomas, on 20 miles per hour, then by all means do so.
Yes, I'd just like to note that TROs, of course, are not just about speed. And I have I'm an outlier. I think there's an overemphasis of speed enforcement. For example, we've heard that the majority, well, just about all enforcement for traffic problems is either a speed van or occasionally a motorbike. I attended a briefing by the Police and Crime Commissioner at which the head of Road Safety for West Mercia was giving a presentation, and every answer to every problem raised by the public was speed enforcement. In fact, much of what they were saying had got nothing to do with speed. And I was astonished to hear that, oh, don't worry, because the officers in the speed enforcement van can see the other offences. So what, you send a speed enforcement van out to see the other things going wrong? That just didn't make any sense at all. And that's exactly what the lady said. So I'm not exaggerating. And so I was astonished at that. And the Police and Crime Commissioner is, I think, personally very keen to reduce the number of injury accidents. And I would ask you, perhaps you don't have these figures now, but what proportion of the enforcement figures are for proactive enforcement, i.e. that are not as a result of an accident? And what proportion of those are speed, and what proportion of those enforcement figures are for something other than speed? So that would be something I would like to know. And I'd like to ask Ed and our two council colleagues here, we've got some very successful traffic calming schemes that have been introduced. I'd like to highlight Pembridge and Amestree, where you've got different coloured roads, you've got rid of the centre line, put white lines along the edge, haven't changed the speed limit, but they do seem to be effective. I don't know if there's any statistics to show that, but people like them, they seem to work. Why aren't we automatically, when we've got the resources, doing it everywhere and those type of villages on main roads exist? We should just say, right, everywhere there's a village on a main road like that, we should do that, because they seem to work. We've got a model that works. The public like it, because it's proactive, it's preventive. It's not waiting for accident figures to tell you, oh, we better look at it now because we've had some people hurt there. So I wonder if you've already got a plan, and that might incorporate what Richard is saying about 20-mile-an-hour speed limits outside schools as a standard model rather than taking each individual case. Is it possible for one of you three to talk about that?
Yeah. Ed, or Bob, did you want to come in on the enforcement?
Firstly, one moment, Councillor, you, Joey. It's all right, there's a list here. That's all right. Yeah, our, first and foremost, I'll give a quick, we don't go anywhere speed limit wise enforcement unless we get the data, we look at the collision history and whatever data. When our operational vehicles are allocated where to go in Herefordshire, they primarily go for speeding concerns, whether it's raised as a result of casualty reduction or whether it's raised by parish councils, councillors wishing enforcement in their areas. However, what does happen if the officer in the vehicle or on the motorcycle does see an individual that's not got a seatbelt on or a mobile phone or something like that, they can and do report back to the our back office, and they are prosecuted or invited to take a course. So they don't go out specifically for in a vehicle or a motorcycle to actually carry out enforcement on non-speed limits. It's when they're there on a speed limit and they see something happening so obvious, they can record it and will go back to a back office, and prosecution will frequently continue. We don't have a lot of offences that way. They're mainly, the vast majority, 99.9% will be speed, but if they see something that's obvious, they will feed that back to a back office and a prosecution will develop.
Right, quickly, Councillor Highfield, before I bring in Ed, and I do want to finish on funding, please.
Okay, but I think this is important. It's my opinion that that's a deeply flawed approach, because there are a lot of things causing accidents on the roads that are not speed. And if we're not proactively looking to try and use enforcement as one of the ways that we reduce those things happening, traffic calming is another, then we're missing a trick, because just hoping that your speed enforcement will accidentally see some of these other things going on does not seem to meet the needs at all. And I have a considerable background in this, and that by taking emphasis off of speed, a huge reduction in injury accidents was achieved. Now, admittedly, that was not in this country, it was overseas, but under the same road regulations, the same rules of the road, and speed, of course, enforcement is important. I'm not denying that. But given this, we've already heard there are several other things that cause accidents. We're not specifically looking for them at all until an accident occurs. And then we say, oh, well, you did that, and therefore we're going to prosecute you for it. That's a bit too late. So I have to register my disapproval of that
If I could
particular
just come in there,
approach.
I mean, obviously the local SNTs, our operational policing units, our motorcycle teams are all out there on the roads, and if they see anything, they will be prosecuted or offences reported. So they're out there. Our officers are out there, looking at for offences like that anyway. But the fact of the matter is that our enforcement officers from the road safety team in the vans and the motorcyclists, they are deployed to speed sites, and if they see anything else associated with the driver, they will report them, and it goes back to a back office to follow up inquiries. So they're not specifically a target on the side of the road looking for mobile phones and whatever, but our road policing, the police officers are. They're out there all the time, day in, day out, and a lot of offences are committed and processed when they're committing these offences, which includes speed as well. But our enforcement officers from the road safety team operation are targeted at those road speed areas, and if they see something, they will prosecute.
Councillor Highfield, if you think it's important, then you can make a recommendation and we can put that forward.
Yeah, I recommend that the police consider targeting offences other than speed, and I mean sending people out to look for them where they're identified as a problem. We've heard that your statistics will show you where things are happening, where behaviours are happening. They should be targeting, not just targeting speed and getting the other things by accident when they're busy doing something else. So I think that my recommendation would be that the other causes of accidents should be specifically targeted.
Yeah, could I just come in there a second? Sorry, just a second. Obviously, we've got the fatal 4 that we've already been alluded to. They are very much on officers on patrols. You know, that they go out there, they're looking for the fatal 4 offences, and so we've got operational officers out there. We've got enforcement officers. We do have campaigns regularly, as I said earlier. We have campaigns that can be seatbelt campaigns, mobile phone campaigns are going on all the time. So the officers are out there on a daily basis enforcing. It's just that with the road safety team, with the van and the bikes, they are specifically sent to speed areas which the parish have got concerns about. And as I say, if they see anything other from their vehicle that isn't speeding, they'll report that back, and the offender can also be prosecuted on that as well. So that they are out there, they are doing it, and targeted campaigns are there as well.
You're doing speed enforcement campaigns every day. You've got people whose only job is to run the speed enforcement van. You don't have anything like that for all the other things causing people to get hurt and injured on the roads. And I think that's a big gap in what's going on with enforcement.
Well, if you make a recommendation, Councillor Highfield, then we can get a response later on. I'm conscious we've come to 1:45, but we've still actually got 1 or 2 areas to cover. So since I'm flexible, if everybody doesn't mind, we'll have a comfort break at 12 o'clock, but no later. Ed, you wanted to come in then, Councillor Price.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on, you referenced Pembridge and Amesbury and the approach there. So Simon can sort of probably provide you a bit more information about how well those sites have worked. But in terms of, requests, I suppose, or how we consider those. Certainly, we're obviously investing quite a lot into the road resurfacing programme that we've got going on. So that started last year. We invested £8 million of our own money into that across the county. There's at least 13 million going in this year that we're doing. And when we come across sites like this, so might be the case with Much Dew Church as well. So when sites come up for resurfacing, that's something that we talk about as a team. In terms of what the opportunities are there to introduce those kinds of measures. Obviously, we can't just turn up with a road surface that's maybe coming to the end of its life and expecting to put some of those treatments in place, so the lining or the high friction surfacing. So Simon will have that conversation about what that should look like in that particular area. And one thing I would say is to particularly work with the local community on what that good can look like. So in Amesbury, for example, I know that they had a group of 4 or 5 residents that took the lead on behalf of the parish council. I think they had a little sort of road safety subgroup, traffic management subgroup, and they worked with officers on what that particular scheme could look like and what they wanted to achieve and their concerns. So it doesn't work with us turning up saying we're going to resurface your road 2 weeks' time, whatever the time limit might be or the notification period might be. It's about having those early conversations saying, we think we've got a problem here in our particular village, our parish. That'll start with conversations with the police, with ourselves as well. And then it'll get explored and develop into a model that you've referenced in those locations. But Simon could probably touch briefly on the impact of what we've seen.
Yeah, we spoke about them earlier with A417 at Ashburton, which was one of the earlier. In fact, Pembridge that you mentioned was probably that was the first time that we'd done it on an A road. And at the time, you said that obviously it's popular now, and they have gained in popularity. When we started doing this, the very first one was actually at Bosbury in 2013, and we just did the Ledbury end of the village on the way in. Purely on the back of a resurfacing scheme that was happening, and we had been discussing with the parish council about this idea. So it's basically evolved over, what is it now? It's 12 years or more that this has been growing, and we did Erdisland just by Pembridge in 2015, and then Pembridge came up for complete resurfacing, and we said, well, we had a discussion with the parish about what we could do. Obviously, we've sort of evolved the idea from different ideas that have existed again around the UK and things that have been seen, and what we've actually done is put something together it's not the same as anybody's, it's similar, but what we've done is cherry-picked what we thought were good ideas and actually started to put them in and then evolve them over time. And I think now we've got to a point where they are popular, and unfortunately they're quite expensive to do, and they normally have to sit on the back of a resurfacing scheme. There is a possibility of line removal, but you can't do that or it's not economically viable or feasible to do it if your existing road surface is poor. The line removal process, it basically destroys the surface. So you are looking at a form of surfacing before you can do this. But what we've been trying to do again over this last probably 10 years is discuss with parishes and say, if you formulate a plan of what you'd like to see for your village, short term, medium term, long term, and it contains an idea such as this, when that opportunity to do the surfacing comes up, we can hopefully include that in the works. What we've had to do occasionally is it's been a little bit last minute, and I would prefer not to. Found out that a surfacing scheme through a village has been happening, had to approach the parish, offer them the option, then explain. Of course, if they haven't seen it, it's now easier because everybody's seen it, but when they hadn't seen it, trying to get a parish to buy into the concept of what it was, where it came from, does it work, etc., was quite difficult. But obviously when you only had a small window to get this agreed, and we said basically we can do it as part of the scheme works. But I think now everybody, because there's more options out there, people generally, we can quote a village and they say, oh yeah, I've seen, we like that. So what we've been doing this year is looking at the pre-agreed surfacing programme for potential sites, and anything that's got a village where it's being surfaced in its entirety. I've been trying to get that included, because when we get the initial trawl of schemes for resurfacing, obviously there's more than can be done. But what we probably need to be doing is deciding whether we prioritise a village that's being, it may be on the list, not necessarily high, but if it's got the opportunity to enhance that village with markings, maybe using the red chip, the different roundel patterns, that's the way forward. So it is being discussed, but at this point in time, it's not concrete.
If you can confirm that every time a village area needs resurfacing, that opportunity to introduce this scheme is always considered, then there's no need to make a recommendation. That would make me very happy.
Okay.
That's certainly what we're trying to do.
It is, yeah, because my life's worth more than it. Well,
Okay.
if I ignore Simon, so yeah.
Okay. I'm going to bring in Councillor Price, and I want to finish on funding, and then we'll have a comfort break, and then we will consider our recommendations. Councillor Price.
Sorry. It's been a very interesting discussion, and what's just come out in the last 2 or 3 minutes has actually uncovered quite a lot in where we are actually at anyway, is that if we're going to resurface, then you look at all of those things. But at the start of this administration, when we said about 20 mile an hour zones and what have you, we made it absolutely clear that our view would be that 20 mile an hours could be done outside any school where the request was made for it, provided it showed some evidence it was necessary. Much Due Church, as Councillor Thomas's reference, is a very poor road structure for having a school on it, and I would absolutely support that we look at that. Councillor Highfield's points about different colour markings or what have you, provided we get the technology right and we put it down right, and it's put down for the right material in the right weather conditions, and it lasts a bit longer than what is currently doing, is great. I absolutely support the side lining rather than the central lining, which is, it's sensible to do it when we're doing resurfacing programs, so it does take time. The issue of enforcement, I would much prefer that if we've got an issue to slow traffic, then it's done by what appears in front of the driver. This is deemed to be a slow area for safety reasons, rather than it's at 20 mile an hour plates up there and you must abide by it, because the police haven't got enough enforcement capability of dealing with it. But if a driver is met with the village gates that we get around the community, of which the police are actually funding some, and in my ward they're actually funding some, which is great, thank you very much. But in my ward, I've seen a 20 mile an hour zone that was coming out of Wales into the Golden Valley North, and because it comes downhill out of Hay, and immediately the parish council every meeting they say this is happening. Those that abide by the rules coming out of Hay at 20 mile an hour are overtaken by those that are now going faster than they would have done if it was when it was the previous 30 mile an hour, because they're up against a slow driver, so they accelerate past and they cause danger. Now, enforcement, if it was made that looks like a 20 mile an hour zone, because it's not going to be enforced, we know that they're not going to be enforced, then that's where we should engineer our future roadworks, and it takes time, and it comes down to the next issue you're going to talk about is funding.
Don't mistake me. I'm not a fan of 20 mile an hour speed limits, except in specific locations where it's relevant. I don't think these village schemes need to incorporate a reduced speed limit. They just need traffic calming measures.
Yep.
Right, I want, Simon, we've only got 6 minutes, so can you be quick there?
Sorry, it's only a really quick one on because we've talked about Pembridge. So obviously when we first did Pembridge, it was a 30, and what it proved is that doing those measures made it a very well respected 30, and actually so well respected that it was close, but not quite to a 20. So when the whole discussion about 20s was brought up, we decided to do, and it's been monitored robustly, we put 20 in Pembridge, and what it's shown is that it still performs as a well-respected 30, but it doesn't perform as a 20. So even with all those measures, with the edge line, roundels on the carriageway patches, we still can't make that perform as what the Department for Transport would say is a 20. But what we can do is make it perform as a really good 30. And I think that's the important element, is to get the speed limits performing as you want them to, even if you've got a 40, if you can make it perform as a 40 rather than reduce it to a 30 and then struggle to make it do 30, that's the approach that the authority should be taking. And I think with what we've got with villages is this model. Actually, we will have a trial where a 40 changes to a 30 to see whether those lines and markings can make that 40 to 30 transition work. And I think that's important. Always put speed limits in you know you can get to work, not aspire to put one in that nobody can ever get to work. And what happens is the police get bombarded with enforcement requests, which I know goes on in Pembridge at this point in time. So that was just an overview, just to say that village and what happened.
Finally, I want to touch upon funding with the two cabinet members. We only spend 100,000 of our revenue on road safety, and we spend about 2 million capital on road safety. I mean, just looking at those figures alone, it seems like a drop in the ocean. I don't know whether you, as cabinet members, think that we are actually focusing enough on road safety when it comes to the funding allocations that we've got.
I would have a view that we have a set amount of budget so if we just take what we get coming in from government, from grants, from our standard monies that come in on an annual basis and council tax, we are constrained by what we spend. It might only be 2 million or 100,000 or whatever, but at every other part of the council, if we said we're not spending enough here or enough there or enough over here, it becomes the same thing. We have to live within our means, and if you decide to spend more on one, it comes off at the expense of something somewhere else. So if you would like to suggest to me where we take the money from to be able to put more into this, I'd be all ears. Thank you.
Councillor Duck, and then for the final point, I'll come to Councillor Pepper. Do you want to make a point?
Yep.
But Councillor Ducken first.
Thank you, Chairman. The 1.5 million you mentioned is for Locks Garage and the other High House. Yeah, but that's part of what we've identified as being the way to do it, and that's what we're doing. So it's not necessarily we're spending that every year, as it were. As Councillor Price was saying, it's been a very interesting conversation today. Lots of things have been mentioned that are good ideas. I think that we do work closely with both the blue light services that we meet with regularly, as you know, quarterly. Perhaps it could be a little bit better with the strategic group, but as Councillor Price said, we work within the budgets of the directorates that we have. If we want to put some more money into road safety or something else, where does it come from? Because we do have only a finite budget. But we are working, I think, cost effectively with regard to what we are doing. But we want to do more. Of course we do. But we haven't got the funding coming in.
And finally, Councillor Pemberton, before we move to a comfort break and our recommendations.
We've learnt a lot about how driver behaviour is so responsible for a lot of road safety issues, but our budget for road safety promotion and publicity is 8,000, which is this tiny, weeny amount. And I just wonder if some of the money that we're spending on minor safety schemes, safety enhancement schemes, are actually just compensating for people's bad driving behaviour, and whether we shouldn't focus on changing that behaviour more than just allowing that behaviour to happen, but making it safer for it to happen.
Finally, Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Councillor Beverley. Could you please elaborate on what you just said there? What in particular are you talking of?
I'm talking about the education.
I understand that. You said there's some money going into another area of road safety.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the kind of budget that we use to put kind of anti-slip surfaces on roads that people perhaps approach too fast, or we change the layout of a road because they take the corner too fast, and whether we are not, and it's a question, I'm not saying we are, but whether we are not just compensating for people's bad driving and spending money on making it safer for them to drive. They can carry on with their bad driving, but it's kind of safer for them to do so.
Thank you. I have a contrary view somewhat to that. I think that the blue light services, and we do have overall a good budget for education. And education is important, of course, but it's the perception of education and people taking it on. But if you've got something that is actually can prevent an accident, i.e. anti-skid services, that has to be a positive, in my opinion. I appreciate what you're saying, but somebody gets into a problem, if there's stuff on the road that will stop them becoming KSI, then that's good.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Pebbody, I think we did mention publicity before, and maybe doing more on publicity across schools, and perhaps that's something we can reinforce in our recommendation on that, in order to pick up your point about 8,000 is a drop in the ocean on that sort of area. Thank you. Oh, Ed,
yeah, just sorry, in terms of the point that Councillor Pebbody's made. So the report, the details in 30 and 31 of the report, where we talk about the resource implications. So that's just the council's resource implications. Obviously, the revenue side of things, it is a completely different pot to what we use for the minor safety schemes, safety enhancement schemes that reference there. So that first line of that capital, that 450,000, that comes from our local transport plan highway maintenance fund. Okay, so we can't use that for the revenue side for road safety promotion and publicity. And then the major road safety schemes, that the £1.5 million that we talked about, which is for this year and next year, is from the council's own investment that it's making. Obviously, those numbers within the report don't reflect the overall budget that we have for road safety training and publicity that obviously partners will also put in. So it doesn't include the fire and police. So obviously, what I'm trying to say is that it will look quite low when you put in the cost of schemes, which are obviously a lot higher than sort of just officer time. So what I would say though is that revenue funding that we do, that's really around Julie's work. So I think, you know, my view personally is that it's very good in terms of what we get back in terms of what we put in there.
Yes. And I would like to end what's been an interesting debate by saying that the statistics are very encouraging on KSIs, and that's credit to the council, the fire authority and the police in terms of what they do on prevention and everything else. But if the committee wants to ask for perhaps more effort to be put on promotion publicity, then perhaps that might be a recommendation that might help to perhaps garner some more money in this area if we could, for the good work that Julie does as well. But thank you very much. We're going to have a comfort break of 15 minutes. If attendees want to leave now, then they can do so, because I know you've got other work to do. But we will be coming back as a committee to look at recommendations and then to move on to the next item, which is our work programme. But thanks. Right. Welcome back, everyone. We are now going to look at our recommendations following that debate on road safety. We have 5 recommendations that are in front of you there. Do you want to read them out?
Yes, Chair.
Scrutiny officer.
Will do, Chair. You have 5 recommendations in front of you. They're as follows. 1, that Herefordshire Council develops a road safety policy that supports the priorities under people, place and growth in the council plan and complements the policy produced by the West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm just going to fix a couple of typos while I'm talking here. The Executive should seek opportunities to improve the road network environs in the 5 market towns to make them safe for all road users. Herefordshire Council to work with West Mercia Police to unlock geographic data about near-miss and dangerous driving reporting to better inform decision making about engineering, education and speed limits zone solutions. For the Council to undertake an evidence-based increase of the road safety education budget or to transfer funding from schemes for children to older adults. And finally, West Mercia Police to consider the balance of factors that contribute to road danger when undertaking road safety enforcement.
Yeah, that's right. And I would prefer the strategy rather than the policy, because it is a strategy in that first one.
I think the third one, sorry, let me look around.
Was it the 4th one?
No,
Richard?
your missus. The third one, I think, is slightly irrelevant.
How we spend our resources. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And I know it comes into policy making in other areas, for example, like street lighting and things like that.
Okay. The other recommendation, which we haven't got up there, is that the council should adopt an automatic policy for villages and schools.
For 20 mile per hour
speed limit.
Not 20,
Bang.
no. A standard policy that we've established a good model that should be automatic in similar locations.
Yeah, okay.
A village with a main road going through it and pavements on each side and housing.
The meeting.
We did, and basically Ed clarified that it is still done on an individual basis, each location. They look at it, they see what the local people want, instead of saying, well, look, there's 17 villages with a main road going through them. Why don't we start off with a standard model and then modify it to suit the circumstances automatically, rather than waiting for each individual model to come through?
Here we don't. Speed limit on a village can be just simply a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. We don't necessarily need all the enhancements with it, which is what they're basically saying is, as maybe now much use which has been resurfaced this year, they will put a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on. But this is yeah, I think we should.
Justine.
Well, just that actually my understanding of what Simon said was it was about making the 30 zones work really well, and that if they're compliant at 30, then there's little chance. And I just had such an interesting conversation with him, and he said that if speed limits appear to be unreasonable or not based on any particular reason, then people's driving behaviour will be unreasonable.
Quite agree with that.
So
and I think that was made quite clear in the explanation.
Right. But if you're talking about a simplification of a TRO process, we could say that.
This is what I am talking about, because it's highly complicated. So the process needs to be simplified. That was my recommendation.
What I took out of that, and I didn't have a chance of kind of having that, asking that question to Ed,
bring back 3 and just
is I'd like to understand the matrix by which TROs are decided, because it appears to be completely random or led by what the parish wants. And I think if we are able to collect this kind of data properly, then that should inform the decision of the TRO. We're going to spend money on this TRO because of these reasons. There doesn't seem to be any link between the data and the decision about a TRO and the process by which a TRO is decided. I didn't have the chance to kind of ask that question.
So what we're saying is the traffic regulation process should be simplified and made clearer.
I
made more transparent.
I just want it to be public.
Should be simplified and made more transparent.
Yeah, I want it to be transparent and public, that we can see how these decisions are reached, so that we know how they're influenced. It might be a very simple process. I think it is at the moment. I think it's a very simple process. I think it's Callum going, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, made complicated by the...
Right, how about that then? A traffic regulation order process should be simplified and its eligibility criteria made more clear.
But I honestly think it's as simple as just someone in the team just already, but I don't know because it's not transparent.
If you don't know, then you can't say that it is.
Make it more transparent.
Yeah, but could they publish a matrix by which they make decisions on TROs?
Should be made more transparent.
But I'd also like it to be public, so we can see it.
And published, and decisions.
Does it?
It does.
Do you think
That's it. I think that's fine. You should have then.
there wasn't time, Louis? Honestly, I had
I know
like
we
a
were struggling, I
tranche
know.
of questions and there wasn't time.
There wasn't time, I know.
The second one, just to perhaps more satisfy Justine, should that mark it towns to make them feel safer for all road users? Because it was her perception that she was interested in. Because they're already working to make them safe within whatever constraints we've got. You don't think so? You didn't say that to these people.
All the 4x4s that are trundling through.
Okay.
What's a disaster?
We didn't.
And HGVs and everything else. Go
Yeah,
on.
I think I agree. You know, to make them not just safer but also feel safer for all road users
But
is
both
a valid.
things, yeah, safe
addition.
and feeling safer.
Thank you.
We didn't even get a chance to discuss market towns in much detail, did we?
We did mention it. You did mention it once, so that gives us the peg at which to hang it. We didn't discuss the 20-mile-per-hour pilot for Ledbury.
No, but we'll keep.
Well, the LTP's come up and connected communities, so you should get it in there.
Yeah.
Because
And
they do talk about.
And could I emphasise that we've heard that the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in Pembridge, in a scheme which has otherwise been very successful, was it was no better than having a 30-mile-an-hour limit. The thing that caused a success was the road scheme, the road design, the traffic calming measures were what's necessary. So personally, I'm against 20-mile-an-hour limits in most areas, except outside schools. But otherwise, I think there needs to be very persuasive reasons before you put a 20-mile-an-hour limit in, because it causes pollution apart from anything else.
Well, we haven't raised it today, but with the LTP next and Connect Communities, have you got a green on that?
Yeah, we have on connected communities.
Well, that's where you
Diana's
can make the point.
on that issue.
Okay. Okay, right. We've got 5 recommendations there. I'm going to vote on taking them forward on block. So are you in favour of taking them on block? 6 now. Sorry, 6. I can't count.
Chair, I'll need to read them out again.
Yeah. Pardon?
I'll need to read them out again.
Oh, will you? Or
I'm afraid so. I'll take my time, Councillor Heath. The recommendations for you to vote on are as follows. There are 6 recommendations. 1, Herefordshire Council develops a road safety strategy that supports the priorities under people, place and growth, complements the policy produced by the West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner. 2, the Executive should seek opportunities to improve the road network environs in the 5 market towns to make them safer and to feel safer for all road users. 3, Herefordshire Council to work with West Mercia Police to unlock behavioural, perception of safety and geographic data about near-miss and dangerous driving reporting to better inform decision-making about engineering, education and speed limit zone solutions. 4, for the Council to undertake an evidence-based children to older adults. 5, West Mercia Police to consider the balance of factors that contribute to road danger when undertaking road safety. And finally, 6, the traffic safety enforcement, apologies. And 6, the traffic regulation order TRO eligibility criteria should be made more transparent.
thank you, Scrutiny Officer. Can we have a vote to take them on block? Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the work programme, and I will then set out some ideas I've got for our work programme going forward. Oh. Are we all right with the live stream still? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, oh yes. We've just talked about transparency, Councillor Harfield. We can hardly not be transparent ourselves. Right. Our scrutiny officer has been working on a review of the scrutiny function following the rethinking governance changes that we made in 2022. And the idea is that all scrutiny committees should work in a more flexible way. That we shouldn't necessarily look to have 6 set meetings a year with set discussions on the topics, but we should allow more time through perhaps cutting down the number of set meetings we have to have more of the work done through task and finish groups, or it could be through spotlight reviews as well. My proposal, and it is one that I haven't shared with you yet, but I've been thinking it through over the last few days, is for us to go to a quarterly cycle for set meetings, June, September, December and March, and I'll explain why I've picked those particular months. July and August are summer months and people like to be away, particularly in August, and that cycle avoids that. And January and February are very busy in terms of budget setting. We're all very busy in terms of trying to focus on setting the budget for the following year. So if we were to go to a cycle of 4 set meetings, June, September, December and March, that would give us the opportunity to intersperse that with informal meetings where we oversee task and finish work that we want done as a committee on particular topics that we want to have the task and finish group look at. And we've got one proposal on the table which I think you're all aware of, is that we want to turn our next topic in July on bus provision into a task and finish group study on bus provision. Because I really think it's so important and it's such a big subject that to try and do it in a couple of hours at a set meeting just wouldn't do it justice. And we've already seen from emails that we had from Justine and others that other councils are doing quite innovative things here. And that's the sort of research that a task and finish study would lend itself to be able to look at what's happening across other councils, do some horizon scanning, and really that would be my first proposal for a task and finish study, would be bus provision. Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, I support the general principle that you've outlaid there. I think it's a good idea. Have you considered how those task and finish work would dovetail with the council officers who normally prepare a report for us on a particular topic? Have you worked out how that would interface?
What we need to do with the task and finish group studies, we need to get Ross Cook on board. So I've asked the clerk to bring forward my strategic meeting that I have with Ross Cook, where I would put that proposal to him. I've also asked the clerk, rather than having a briefing meeting with the officers on what would have been our topic for July on buses, that we would then turn that into getting their input into terms of reference on the task and finish group for buses. I've drafted a set of terms. You've got to refine them. We will need to share that with you. But the idea I've got, we won't have a June meeting now, of course. We wouldn't start the quarterly cycle until September. But I would see that between now and July, which would be an informal meeting then, we would share the TORs with yourselves for comment, with officers to get their input, and with Ross Cook, because we need his support to get officer support for the task and finish group. Because there's no point us doing that in isolation, because it just doesn't work. I mean, unless you've got an officer there who is able to take any issues we've got back into other officers.
So you, just to clarify, you're proposing that a suitable officer would be part of the task and finish team that was working on it?
They normally do have officer support.
Yeah, the only one I've ever worked on, there wasn't any officers on it, so.
Yeah. But if we're looking at the form of the task and finish group as well, I'm not necessarily saying that this committee should just turn itself into a task and finish group on this, because I think that's not fair on other councillors. I think the chair of the committee should come from this group, if we can find a chair who can commit the time to do this, because it's going to be quite an intensive piece of work for a number of months. So we can't just have a chair who is just normally going to be a chair. They need to be actively involved in it.
Another question then would be: Are you envisaging that there will be 4 task and finish target subjects per year to fit in with the?
There would be more. I wouldn't say necessarily 4. There would be more.
There might be more.
We would still have set topics as well.
Yeah.
And I'll talk through them shortly. But if the committee's happy with the task and finish proposal, then what we've got to do over the next 2 months is work that up. Work that up in terms of reference, in terms of the membership of the committee. I would also like to have some co-optees on the committee as well. I don't think it works if it's just simply councillors and officers. We need to have an outside view as well. And we can talk about that over the next 2 months about who that should be. But buses for us would be one particular nominee I would like to make, because I worked with them very closely in the 232 service, which is a shining example of what you can do without necessarily having council back. And even though the council funded it, the work was really done through the efforts of them with our support. But if we are going to promote task and finish work, then the committee has to be committed to it. That's what I'm saying. There's no point saying, yes, we'll have a task and finish group, set them off and let them just get on with it. We will need to have regular reports back to us, whether that's even through email or whatever, rather than just sit on meetings, so that we can give input ourselves in terms of how the work is going. Richard?
Well, I've served on one task and finish, which was children's. I don't think it achieved very much, except I was actually in here on the meeting, and the one thing which was very obvious was then director was not up to the job, and it was, but I could see that, and I was watching his reaction and the questions being fired, etc., etc. So how do you think that task and finish are going to be more efficient in what we do? Because like we have grilled our officers quite well today, and so why do you think that's more efficient?
Can I just chuck in there? I was on that same task and finish group, and the chairmanship of it was the key reason why part of it was done well, but it was never finished. So that's why it wasn't as effective as it should have been. And I think if you choose the right chairman who's got an interest for each group, you know, each one of the tasks got the right chairman and the right mix of people involved who've got the knowledge and the interest, then I think it could be very effective. That one did a good job on part of the question and didn't touch on other parts because of chairmanship.
I did actually. That actually wasn't a task and finish group. That was just a working informal meeting of the committee that pulled together. That's rather different from a. It was called a working group. Yes. So it featured. The difference being, of course, a working group is just an informal. Is the committee working informally outside of a committee meeting? A task and finish group, for example, wouldn't necessarily include any of the members of the committee other than the chair himself. So you pull from the entirety of the council membership, apart from those that sit in cabinet. What this allows you to do is to ask rather bigger questions than you can do within a committee meeting. So time and again, you sought to look at strategic issues through formal committees, and it hasn't really worked because you've bitten off more than you can chew within the context of a 3-hour meeting. So something like buses, for example, you might want to go and speak to some other providers of you know, so for example, one of the areas that the Department for Transport is investigating is demand responsive transport, taxis essentially, rather than buses. So perhaps you'd like to go and look at some other local authorities and see the ways they're providing it. You might want to look at how other local authorities fund community transport and the different ways that they do that. They do it very differently here to in Shropshire to in Wiltshire, for example. Why is that? So, and how does that fill in that mix? So what role does passenger transport have? We transport an awful lot of children with ascent to and from school. We transport children with learning difficulties. We transport older adults to and from all sorts of community settings. So is there an opportunity to pull all of this together, for example? How, you see, there's a lot there that you can cover, and you can't cover this in a 2-hour meeting, and you can't cover it just by questioning people, because sometimes it's better to have a more informal conversation, and those officers can't have those conversations in meetings because they're on camera and on YouTube. So it provides much more flexibility. And I would heartily recommend that you start from asking yourselves, what are the priorities for this committee? What are the questions that you want to answer? What are the things that are keeping the council awake at night that you can be helpful towards? Then you start asking yourself, how do we go about that work? And then you ask yourself, well, what meetings do we do? And then who's going to do it? So start with your questions and your priorities, and then work backwards. And myself, Simon, Henry and Alfie, are your support in this?
We're not dealing with a blank sheet of paper here, though, Daniel. We have got priorities already set out for the work programme. The LC WIP, I think, is a priority because if you remember from our active travel measure set of recommendations, every response to that recommendation was it'll be an LC WIP. So I want to know whether it's going to be an LC WIP or not. So we've got that. We've also got land use and management as another priority, and we've got buses as we had for the July meeting. So while I understand what Simon is saying, that's another debate, and I'm anxious to move forward here. And I think sometimes you have to get a balance between this discussion we have to have about what else should be on the work programme going forward, but also moving to this new way of working. And I would like to do that from today to see how it does work out. I don't think anyone would disagree in the council that buses isn't a suitable subject for a task and finish group.
And the timing's just right.
Our timing's just right. We've got a white paper coming up. Again, that answers your point, Richard, about if you want to look at these wider questions, you can't just sit down and have a set meeting and talk about it. You really need to have time to look at them and to see how they will impact on what we might want to recommend as a task and finish group in terms of bus provision in the county. So, while I accept that in a perfect world, Daniel would be right, you would transition this by having a sort of debate that you would stand back and say, well, let's look at what we should be looking at as a committee, and then what should be a set meeting, what should be a task and finish group. I think on this occasion, I would like to move forward, and I've got a broad outline in my mind what the next or the rest of this year would be. We would have an informal in July to finalise the arrangements for task and finish group. August is a dead month, so my idea would be we'd still do the LC WIP in September, because I want to pin officers down to why they kept saying all our recommendations on active travel measures would be covered by the LC WIP, because we want to test that and say, is that right? December then would be my idea of when the task and finish group could ideally finish their work and come back to us, because that gives them, Daniel, 3 months, which is a reasonable amount, isn't it?
Depends on what you decide to look at.
Yeah, well, but my idea at the moment is 3 months would be enough, because
Is there any
otherwise it could
reason
go on
why
forever.
you only start one task and finish group moving? Because you can identify a couple or three topics. If you're just having one councillor chairing it, you've got the people, as long as the council officers have got the people available to help with it, because some of these things might take longer and some might be shorter.
Oh, I agree. But at the moment, just to get us moving into this way of working and to actually have a real timetable for the work programme rather than always discussing it, because we might never come to a conclusion. My idea would be we still do LC WIP in September as a set meeting. In December, we would aim to have that as a meeting that looks at the findings from the task and finish group, at least insofar as they've got there. Yeah. Yeah, the buses one. Yeah.
Do bear in mind there are 5 committees, so and these are anticipated to be quite large, involved pieces of work, and so if you decide to set off on 2 or 3 of them, then and the other committees do, then suddenly we're dealing with 15 projects simultaneously. So I think the anticipation is that these would take place over the course of many months, and you would do your work over the so you wouldn't be rattling through 4, 5, 6 of these a year, that just sounds like committee meetings to me. So you'd do 1 or 2 of these a year. I mean, plus bear in mind as well that there are only so many questions to be answered here. If you sort of rattle through all of your questions in 18 months by doing them very quickly, then what are you going to do with the rest of your time?
And could I ask, Daniel, the other committees that you deal with, they've also been recommended to have more flexible way of working, and has that also translated into the idea that they should have, like this, fewer meetings and with target and finish? Is that how it's going to work with the other committees? Do you know?
They're having those conversations at the moment, but that seems to be the case. So Scrutiny Management Board, for example, is looking to meet only when it needs to consider the budget or quarterly outturns and to carry on the rest of its work through working groups. It looked at the task and finish group, but it decided that it would be better doing its work through working groups, just for reasons of time more than anything, as in the deadlines rather than the amount of time. It looks like the Health and Wellbeing Committee is going to focus on a large piece of work, and how much capacity it has to look at other matters is a moot point then. So at the moment they're all looking at it differently, which was kind of the point really. So they're looking at the work they want to do and then asking themselves how to go about it, rather than asking themselves at this stage how many meetings they need.
But for Richard, right.
I'm not happy with this recommendation. You're going to usurp this committee if a group of councillors or whoever go off and discuss something which is environmental.
Then they come back to report to us. But you could be on that.
You're not taking councillors that have an interest in the environment.
But we will be asking for nominations.
Yeah, but you might get people on there for political reasons.
No, we're not doing it politically.
Well, yeah, but we'll come under pressure. Like I was SMB, for example. I told my leader I wanted to stand down this time last year, and he put me under pressure. No, don't do that. Stay on. Whether it was the right decision or not, I don't know. But anyway, I can see where you're coming from, but I can't see it achieving. I can't see it achieving it. What you're aiming to do, because this committee is probably one of the most efficient at putting officers and other people under pressure. We give them a fair bit of a reasonable amount of sort of stick today, but and would a task and finish do that?
Well, it's only one topic. The committee is still going to be looking at other topics, of course.
There'll be some topics where you absolutely want to have a formal committee meeting.
Yes.
So when you're holding officers to account, is perhaps the way of putting it. That's best done within a formal committee meeting. Other work just is not suited to formal committee meetings, and that's the point that we're making. Different ways of working allow you to answer different questions.
I fully accept that, but what? Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is good. I can see where you have a big subject, for example, buses is a damn big subject. Whether or not it's going to be better. The thing is, what we say, we hold officers to account. What we do, or I feel we do, is make officers think. Today, I can see Ed Bradford, for example, isn't probably totally convinced that some of the things that they're suggesting is maybe right. I can see by his reaction. And I think this is the thing, is I feel our role in scrutiny is not to, necessarily, is to assist your cabinet in making decisions, because we are providing the evidence in advance of what the decisions they're going to make. It's pointless.
The task and finish group is still working to us, Richard. It's not separate. It's got to come back and report to us as the ESSC.
And
I'll go along with you to do it once and we'll see.
We'll see.
I'm sure you'd agree as well, Richard. We never have time to cover the topics. I mean, there were so many unanswered questions in this debate, and I think this is what it provides us with.
Well, we
It's
never
just
have time
more
because
opportunity.
our agenda is quite often too
But
big.
I agree with Justine there. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's a huge subject that we covered today, and to cover that in a couple of hours, and a bit of time we spent preparing for it in advance is tough. And the other thing is, Richard, if we have a task and finish group, we really will be well informed, or at least the people involved in that will be really well informed, and will be in a much better position to challenge council officers about their direction and how they're managing something, because we'll hopefully, if we do it right, we'll really know a lot of facts that are important and relevant.
Certainly, I feel after every meeting of this committee, I always feel I'd like to do the meeting again. Now I have the information.
know.
Now I, know where I want to target the questions and stuff.
Right.
And I think that task and finish group is going to give us that opportunity.
We've only got 2 minutes to go. I'll share an email with you on my proposals, so it's clear. The draft 2 hours are with Daniel at the moment. We'll hopefully have Simon, you could have a meeting arranged between myself, Daniel, Justine and you to finalise those TORs. There you can see exactly what we're talking about, flesh on the bones as it were. But I will share an email setting out what I think the work programme would look like.
I like the general idea. We can refine it as we go along.
For the rest of 25-26. Thank you, but I accept, Richard, the proof will be in the eating. I agree entirely, and let's see what happens. Yeah. So the date of the next meeting, which at the moment is going to be an informal meeting, will be the 7th of July at 10 a.m, which will be to finalise the arrangements for the task and finish group. And if any of you want to volunteer to be chair of that, then I'm quite happy for you to step forward and do so. I don't think it should be me. I mean, obviously, I could do it, but if it was me, I just think it's defeating the purpose.
I definitely want to be a part of the task.
You want to be part of the group, yes.
Majority, it depends on your subject, because if you're going to do it like this, you're really looking for, if for example, we were talking about policing.
It would be Robert, I know.
Policeman.
Well,
that would his knowledge of policing would be. If you were talking about agricultural terms, then maybe my knowledge is best served.
And just
various
obvious for this transport thing, because she's taken a passionate interest in it for some time.
Okay.
And she's the vice chair. She should get a chance to be a boss.
yeah, but you've got to be able to commit the time, but we need to, we'll finalise that. So the next meeting is an informal meeting on the 7th of July at 10 a.m. And at 1 o'clock, I bring this meeting to a close. Can we have the live stream switched off and confirmation